out of what we're missing.
Same with Fraser, we were just waiting. So I'll start the feed.
I'll just run your mail.
Hi, Peter, how are you? You're on mute.
Yeah, I didn't realise I had control.
How you going?
Good, good. You surviving?
Yeah, no, it's been a hectic period, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
You're seeing it yourself from many different perspectives, but
yeah.
I had a staff presentation today, which I'm doing on a weekly basis now, using this advanced technology of Zoom, which is a really great communication tool.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll be continuing to use after the crisis.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will.
Yeah, and amongst other things, just reiterated, I think, a little bit more of the optimism that's about the place and a bit of light at the end of the tunnel, which is great.
Yep.
But one can't be complacent.
No. So you're doing this to all staff with your Zoom, or?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Which is predominantly the inside staff, and then on a fortnightly basis, I go out to the depot and have a conversation with the depot staff, and every few weeks, Karen joins in and also says a few words from a mayoral perspective. So
great. Yeah. No, that's really good.
Yeah. Communication, as they say, in the time of crisis.
Yeah. Well, they say, they talk about, I read an article about Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, and this is an American article, and they were suggesting that she's probably one of the greatest leaders in the world at the moment, mainly because of her leadership, and it's the clarity of her communication that is the thing that sort of stands out, and the empathy that she exhibits.
Right.
So
okay,
it's interesting. These things can be very important in these kind of situations, particularly, I guess.
Absolutely.
Certainly stands in contrast to Donald Trump. I hope I'm not offending anybody there.
I don't think you are. Yeah, you wouldn't want to be in America, that's for sure.
That's right.
So I think this is my third Zoom meeting now with Councillor Kosh and Councillor Little. So our third. We'll have to stop doing this. People will start talking.
Yeah.
Oh, right. And we're live on YouTube, just in case we're... So the world is seeing and listening.
That's right.
Mayor, I've just tried to get hold of Peter Brass, on the phone. He hasn't answered. I've left a message, so hopefully he'll get back to me shortly.
What about Di Fraser? Oh, she's on, is she? Okay. Okay, good. So Peter Brass, what happened to Peter? No? Oh, okay. He's probably off having tea or something.
Yes, well, I actually snuck tea in between the normal meeting and the council meeting. So I was like,
Are you eating Paul Little, are you?
what's that?
Paul Little, he hasn't got anything to eat.
Oh, no, well, I had dinner in between Norma and council.
Oh, did you?
I thought the council meeting would go a lot longer.
Didn't I hear somebody at one of the councils, or was it Burnside or somewhere, that got into trouble because they had a glass of wine while they were having the council meeting?
And fair enough too.
Eh?
Fair
No,
enough.
they got in trouble from the press. Or somebody.
I don't disagree with that.
Cheers.
I've got water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul, are you looking forward to the footy starting again?
Yes, very much so. The can't wait for the Sandful competition to start. Definitely.
They'll be all running around for free, won't they? They're not getting paid, are they?
Well, that's the talk, that they're going to play for nothing. So play for the Guernsey.
Oh, that's all we ever played for.
Yeah. Not sure when it's going to start. They were saying July, or
right.
haven't caught up with the latest, but I know at one stage they were saying playing without crowds, but they don't get very big crowds to Sandful games these days, so there could be appropriate social distancing with a normal crowd anyway.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's a bit like a Sheffield Shield game. I mean, I've been to some Sheffield Shield games, and you got a whole stand to yourself.
yeah. Yes, exactly.
But then again, if there's no AFL being played or a very reduced competition, it may well be that the SANFL will have a real resurgence. You never know.
Yeah, yeah.
You never know.
Yeah, we'll see what happens to the local league. That's the other thing.
Well, I don't know how you can play football without a football.
But what, a football?
Yeah, how do you play football without a football?
The
guidelines say that you minimise, sharing items and things like that. It's a ridiculous thing to have in a guideline for little.
It is a bit odd. But...
Yeah. I was talking to the president of the Williston Football Club during the week, and they're just trying to get their heads around. They don't know how. But I think if they can actually have cohorts of 10 down one end, up there and around, there has to be some allocation of that as a complete space, so they can at least train together in groups of 10. Yeah, they'll do it.
Oh,
yeah. What they're saying, Karen, when I spoke to them, they were going to, every time the goal was kicked, they were going to rub a clean Oh,
Where's the presiding member?
I've tried to ring him twice. So
yeah,
I'm not sure where he's
no,
at.
every quarter to clean the ball.
I think they're fabulous organisations, aren't they, Paul? You know, and they will get their head around it, and they'll find a way of making it contact sport. We love it because it is a contact sport. So, but
Yeah.
at the same time, you know, we've got to be safe. Look at Japan; they had to shut down. Korea, they opened up their nightclubs. They had to shut everything down, and even stricter. So it actually killed their businesses and everything. So we don't need that. And we've got fabulous health officials in charge. I'm really impressed with their leadership and they're sticking to the line. Their health comes first.
Actually, what I found is I'm finding heaps more people out walking and riding bikes. It's unbelievable. It's great.
It's beautiful out in our parklands and our walking
Oh,
trails.
it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, local parks have become a feature now, haven't they?
Yeah, but
Well,
underrated.
into their own, and you know, we at playgrounds. I can't tell you how excited my grandson was when the playgrounds opened about coronavirus and how you couldn't go near playgrounds, and he's 3.5.
Yeah.
And, you know, just needing a playground to take a child to that really needed sort of release is just so important. And we're so lucky to have them free. Yeah.
Brilliant. It's fantastic.
For granted a bit.
Mayor and members, I have tried to get hold of Peter Brass again. His phone's just going to message bank, but I have sent him a message as well. So not sure what his situation is. But Peter Fairley, I think you're deputy chair if the committee was inclined to start before Peter Brass returns.
Is Councillor Fraser beaming in?
Yes.
Well, I can't see her as of yet.
David's just talking to her now and she's about to log on.
Actually, it was good that we brought the meeting forward. I mean, I'm glad David rang and told me it was good. Just waiting around.
Is Peter coming, I think?
I'll see that.
Peter, I have tried to get hold of Peter Brass again, but yeah, the phone just keeps going through the message bank.
Do you want to start, or what would you like to do, Paul and Peter?
Well, I'm in the committee's hands. Obviously, Peter Fairley's deputy chair, but we do have a quorum, so it's up to members if they wish to wait a bit longer for Peter or start the meeting. Or another option could be if you wish to just change the order of the items such that if Peter Brass does join us, he can be part of the conversation for the more sort of strategic discussions relative to budget review and the local government performance excellence program. Only as a suggestion.
Just a question on process. We commencing, as we actually put it, commencing no earlier than 8 or at the conclusion of the special council meeting. So given that it was in that previous, on this agenda, are we able to start early? I know we want to start early.
Well, I think, Mayor, the key word is there is or. at the conclusion of the special council meeting.
So the special council finished at, what was it?
But it also says no earlier than 8 o'clock, so I guess it's open to interpretation, but it does say or at the
yeah. Just another question. So we finished the special council meeting at 6:42, so we probably need to start, don't we?
Sorry, what was that, Mayor?
Well, if we assume that we're starting at the conclusion of the special council meeting,
Mm-hmm.
we need to start because it's a half hour.
Yes.
We have to start within half hour, don't we? Is that?
Yeah.
So I would suggest that we start. That would be my suggestion anyway.
Where's Henry and Paul Little?
Henry's there.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. Oh, didn't see there. All right, there you go.
Peter, you happy to kick off?
Yep, you're ready to go?
Yep.
Okay. All right. All right, well, I'll open the meeting. Thank everybody for their attendance. I'll go through the statement of acknowledgement first. We would like to acknowledge that this land we meet on today, even though we're not actually on it, or most of us aren't, is the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge that the Kaurna people, as custodians of the Greater Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. Attendance today, I think everybody's here apart from Peter Fraser at the moment. It's an apology. Hopefully he'll join us at some point. Is anybody else an apology? I think that's it, isn't it? I think everybody else is here. Can everybody hear me? Motions to grant leave of absence, I guess there's none. Leave of absence, none. Non-attendance, none. Any declarations of interest? None. Confirmation of minutes of the Audit Committee meeting that's held on the 3rd of March.
I'm happy to move that way.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Fraser, is that right? You seconding? Thank you. All those in favour? Carried. Okay. Any business arising from those minutes? Anybody wants to raise? If not, we'll move on to the officers' reports. So the first item we have is the business improvement and reform and productivity update. Paul, did you want to talk about that? Brief us on that.
Yes, I can. Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. This is really just an information update report for the committee relative to the local government reform process. We've attached the documents being the final inquiry report done through the Productivity Commission. Subsequent to that, also attached the state government's response to that, in addition to comments from the LGA and from the administration as well, which is provided as attachment 3. What we've noted in the commentary, members, is our understanding is that due to COVID-19, there has been an understandable delay with this process, but nonetheless, we're of the understanding the state is still keen to pursue reform, but obviously COVID-19 has meant other priorities have intervened. We've referenced on page 6 of 25 of the agenda, members, relative to sort of key actions and associated timelines. And then we've also provided commentary relative to our review of procurement and contract management, bearing in mind there has been this financial year has been a deliberate change in the organisational structure in that regard. We do now have a designated officer, Tara Shillabeer, being the author of the report, operating now in this space. So we're very much anticipating there will be wins and efficiencies we can gain in this space through that dedicated resource, as has been referenced by Tara in the report. But at this stage, really very much providing it to you as a sort of preliminary information report, but happy to answer any questions members may have.
Karen, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Paul, and please thank Tara for a very thorough report. And there's certainly a really good action plan planned. I've just got, you've mentioned in here $1 million could be achieved if we put these actions in place. I'm just wondering, some of these seem to sit with LGA procurement. So where does LGA procurement sit with these initiatives or these actions?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Mayor, look, I'd see the LGA procurement and also the more local regional procurement board being as partners to this, but that is very much dependent on the nature of the various contracts and tenders that are put out. But we certainly have been actively involved with the assistance of the LGA procurement and the Barossa procurement group, but their input is very much dependent on the nature of the contract. So we wouldn't be necessarily using them with all contracts. It's again, you're just dependent on the nature of the supply and the contract.
Subsequent, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Karen.
With that, with the activity and the target timeframe, so I'm looking on page 7 and 8, specifically, Paul. Can we get an idea of the breakdown of the savings within that 1 million or within those boxes? Is that able to be provided out, subsequent to this meeting?
Through the chair, look, Mayor, at this stage, they're really just sort of preliminary indicative figures from a sort of budgeting perspective that relative to the 2021 budget. So, which obviously hasn't transpired yet. So we're really just listing them as at this stage, aspirational savings that we believe could potentially be achieved. Does that answer your question?
With $1 million, you've come up with $1 million, so there must be some detail on that.
Yes, well, that through the chair, that's predicated essentially on the top of page 7, where we're referencing contracts and materials. So it's that $1 million or up to $1 million efficiencies and savings doesn't just relate to capital works. It relates to our whole contracts and materials that we tender for, whether it's operating or capital. And we've referenced in the top of page 7, you'll see, like, for example, for 18, 19, 17, 18, we had in the order of over $11 million in recurrent contracts materials work. So that indicative aspirational target is based on our holistic contracts materials, which is capital and operating.
Thank you.
Paul, do you see any, we can't go ahead, Councillor Koch.
Okay, I'll just unmute myself. Unmute. Is that it?
Yep, we can hear you.
Right, yep. There's a question about procurement. One of the feedbacks I get is that it's very onerous for particularly small businesses to compete for tenders because of the different layers that we tend to put in place, you know, that they have and the hurdles that people have to go through. And it's really only the bigger operators that have all those, say, procedures or whatever in place, where so that they tend to get the job, and it tends to escalate out because you know, we've got all these other layers in place. Whereas the smaller guys can actually do the work, but don't necessarily have all the, can really want to go through all the drama, or all the effort of jumping through all those hurdles. So is there any way of simplifying the procurement process so it's a bit of a level playing field for the smaller operators as compared to the bigger operators? And the second thing I want to comment on is that it seems like there's an extra cost burden onto local government because all these different layers that the industry says, oh, I've got to go through all these things, so therefore I'm going to charge you more. So again, the cost sort of escalates up because of almost all these different layers that we're imposing on people. So any comments there?
Yes, again, through the chair. My understanding with conversations with Tara, and I think we had referenced it in the report. I'm just trying to find where we had referenced it, but there was very much a focus towards streamlining that tender process. So it certainly wasn't designed to be a overly complicated process, because as you touch on there has been from time to time feedback that the tender process for suppliers has been too complex, too onerous, particularly for small suppliers. My understanding was and is that we're endeavouring to streamline that process wherever we can, such that there's not that perceived level of difficulty from suppliers, whether they be small, local or otherwise, in submitting tenders.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
Okay, any other comments anyone wants to raise? If not, we've got a resolution here that simply that the Audit Committee notes the Business Improvement Update Report. Sorry?
I'm happy to move that way, Chair.
Okay, and Councillor Koch, second?
Yep.
Thank you. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, so the next item is the third quarter budget review. Paul, I guess you want to take us through this, hopefully.
Yes, can do, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Yes, members, this is obviously the final quarterly budget review we do for the 19-20 financial year. And further to recent resolutions from the council, there's been the intent of the review, as normal with the last review, has been to project the revised estimated result for the 30 June, such that the estimated forecast in this report for 30 June can then inform essentially the starting position for the 2021 budget. However, we have referenced in the report, members, on page page 2 of the agenda in the exec summary, referenced that there's been, in view of the recent decisions from council relating to COVID-19, there was very much an intent to identify savings that could be brought to the table. And as an administration, we've endeavoured to do that to obviously reduce the financial impost on the community. We've referenced that in the report, such that the two of the key budget variations we're proposing to you tonight, which are included in Appendix 22, notes, I think, which ones are they? 6 and 7. The approach initially was to identify what was the direct financial consequences as a result of COVID-19 to date. And what we've identified through that process is, as we've referenced in the report, there's been about over $250,000 of reduced revenue, and that's really as a result of the closures of the facilities, whether it be the Gawler Sport Community Centre, the Visitor Information Centre, the Civic Centre, and the Aquatic Centre. Noting that, as we're now aware, those sites are incrementally now reopening, albeit with social distancing restrictions and the like. So the variations in that regard were very much based on the expectation that the restrictions wouldn't have been eased as quickly as they have. Conversely, from an expenditure point of view, offsetting that revenue reduction has been the stand down of casual staff and associated costs with the temporary closure of facilities, whether it be, for example, reduced power consumption at premises that are closed. The net wash-up result of that, members, was in terms of direct immediate financial consequences of COVID-19 was a nominal expenditure increase to date of just under $12,000, which we've referenced in the report. However, as I touched on earlier, members, we've endeavoured to identify potential savings that could be brought to the table and considered in this review document, and that consideration has delivered net savings, as we've noted in Appendix 2 again, in the order of $340,000. Now, a lot of that, members, has been sort of influenced by one-off savings from positions vacant, for example, but nonetheless, in saying that, members, that $341,000 net saving has been offset partly by, as members may recall, Adam Faulkner's presentation to a recent council meeting, where he referenced there was, due to a slump in the commodities market, a substantial increase in the projected operating deficit for Norma. We've had to reflect that in the projected forecast. That will have a financial consequence, albeit a non-cash financial consequence of approximately $149,000. And we've also referenced as a variation, again, due to the slowdown in the development market, particularly a reduction in the estimated developer contributions from Gawler East development, and from an operational perspective, that translates to $127,000. The net wash-up, members, is, from an operating perspective, is a $43,000 increase in the projected surplus from, I think it was 90,000 to 137. However, as we have noted in the agenda, I'll just draw the reference to page, on page 15 of 25, under the financial budget implications section, what we have referenced was that the decisions from the special council meeting earlier tonight incorporates rent reductions which haven't been incorporated into the budget review pending the decision from the meeting just had. Now that they've gone through those, that impact will be, we've outlined there, in the order of $40,000, which will just essentially bring back the estimated surplus to the equivalent value as that projected or forecasted in the second quarterly budget review. On the final point, members, I just refer you to, from a sort of cash flow perspective, you'll be aware that Council has agreed to, on application, allow for ratepayers facing financial hardship as a result of COVID-19. There was, or there is now, a provision in the third quarter budget review from a cash perspective on the statement of cash flow statement. We're suggesting, based on the number of deferral applications we get, we had predicated our estimates of that being anything up to $1 million. But again, that will be very much influenced by the number of requests we get for deferral. But nonetheless, we have factored that in. However, that from a cash flow perspective, that is forecast and earmarked to be offset by the reduction in the quantum of capital works in terms of the dollar value of the capital works, as we've outlined in the report. So essentially the net result from a cash perspective is the forecasted reduction in cash inflows as a result of any rate payment deferrals is being forecast to be offset by deferred capital expenditure to the 2021 financial year. So those two essentially balance out from a cash perspective, and we've noted with the financial indicators, the operating ratio is forecast to be at 0.5%. The liabilities ratio still very much in the low 80s, 80.7 is forecast, and a nominal reduction in the asset sustainability ratio from 126% to 119, albeit it's important to recognise that 119%, it's still above the policy target of 90 to 100%. So members, hopefully that sort of encapsulates the key variations we're proposing for your consideration tonight as part of the third quarter budget review, but certainly more than happy to answer any questions that members may have.
Okay, Councillor Fraser. Councillor, yep, are you okay? Go on.
In the capital expenditure, the revenue budget, there's three items there, three projects that are going to go over. The first one, A, is obviously because of capital grant that's not coming through. But the other two, the aquatics, the Gora Aquatic Centre change rooms and the Walker Place redevelopment, why are they over? Why will they go over? The developers from Walker Place have said all along that it would be finished by the end of June.
Through the chair, Councillor Fraser, presumably you're referring to bottom page 13 of 25. Yes. Just to be clear, what we're referencing there is those projects, those values quoted, then relates to the value of the works for those projects we're proposing would be deferred to 2021 budget. So we're not suggesting that those projects are going over budget.
No, I knew that. No, I knew that, but they're not going to be finished on time.
No, we're just proposing that based on the, I guess, the status of the projects, that these are the indicative dollars that would be deferred to 2021, and that may be just like for the first months of the new financial year, July and August potentially. I don't know the exact estimated completion dates. All we're recognising here is that these projects wouldn't
Not
be
gonna be-
fully completed by 30 June.
Okay.
And they might just be completed very early in the 2021 financial year.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Any further questions? I note Peter Fraser has now joined us, as has Tony Marto. Welcome. I don't know if you want to change the roles here. Does that present technical problems here? Not sure if that's something. Aaron, are you in control of this?
Kate would be Peter.
Okay, okay.
All done?
Okay, so we now have Peter, you're taking over as the chair. Okay, you've got the steering wheel.
Okay, thank you, Peter, and thank you for chairing the meeting. Apologies, I didn't get your message, Paul, but I had to go and get my mother. I had to pick her up, so I just came back and noted your message, and I came straight in. So apologies for that. But so if we come to 6.2, so is there any further discussion on this item?
I thought it was a good report, just by way of comment, and there's a lot of moving parts going on here, and there's still a couple of months of actual time to travel, so anything could happen, but it was pretty well put together report, I thought. So
Thank you
just
for
my
those
comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. So if there's no further comments, can we have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation, please?
I'm happy to move.
Thanks, Peter. Seconded. Who's seconding?
I'm happy to second.
Thanks,
I'm happy to
guys. Thank
second.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All in favour? Okay, looks like we're carried. Thank you. 6.3, the Performance Excellence Program results.
Just got a question. Got a question, Peter.
Yes, please, Karen.
Firstly, thank you for the report, and I think the program's a good one. Just on, I was looking through the results as they relate to the town of Gawler, and I noticed around internal controls, compliance and controls, we don't seem to be up with these, I guess, the SA survey population, and we're probably halfway lower. And I just wondered about if there was any comment around that from you, Paul Hallwood. I'm looking specifically at page 304 of 451 in the attachments. I find these documents really interesting, I must admit, and I think they're really, really useful for councils, and I think it's great that we're part of this program.
What page, Karen?
304.
Thank you.
And I'm specifically looking at point 5, and I know these, you can always take it with a pinch of salt, but I think there's a bit of correlation between some of the auditors' comments as well.
Mayor, just so I can answer, I've got the original hard copy of the report, not the agenda version. What page are you referring to of the actual
I'm in
PwC?
finance. It says 45.
45? Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Right.
So I'm looking at compliance and control, point 5, Paul, and I guess it's where we sit compared to the rest of the participating South Australian, or it says SA survey population, and I'm making the assumption that's the other local government councils, if I got that right. Have I got that wrong?
No, you're right, Karen. It is lower than
Well,
the SA.
Correlation between that and what the auditors were making a few comments on the medium risk items. But yeah, I guess is it a flag for us to further look at our internal controls and where we're at with internal controls, because we're going to do a body of work around that.
Karen, if
yes.
I can maybe
Yeah.
just quickly raise something on that point. I think one of the things I've noted is that the metro councils, if they're included in that, started 2 years before the regional councils and are much more advanced. And I noticed that even now for the audit committees that I sit on for the big metros, they are much more advanced, only because they started earlier. And as we know, Gawler only picked up, and that's the system that Tony's been managing now as with the internal controls. I think with a bit more maturity, we will get it on track, but happy for Paul or maybe even Tony to speak to this.
I accept that. I think that's what's so good about these types of programs, is that it picks things up and we can make sense of them, but we also perhaps have an aspirational target of where we sit and whether we're comfortable with where we're sitting. So yeah, happy to hear the comments from staff.
Thank you, through the chair. Look, I can kick off, I guess, in that regard. The one you referred to, Mayor, on page 45 of the report itself, refers to then, that's a snapshot of figure 2.3 on page 48, which is references the finance function effort by process. So my understanding through that, members, is what's on page 48, what that is identifying is summarising the finance function effort, split across the key elements of transactional efficiency. So that's in terms of, I guess, the whole transactional process administered through the finance function and finance team, then translating to what you've touched on is the compliance and control, and then also lastly with business insights. So you'll see from that figure 2.3 where we're suggesting, based on the results, 63% of that effort relates to transactional efficiency, which is at the higher end of the scale compared to the survey population, particularly compared to metro councils, but on par with regional councils. From a compliance and control perspective, as you touched on, yes, noting the 7% element there, which is certainly at the lowest end of the scale, and from a business insights perspective, most probably at the higher end of the scale. So these results, I guess, are very much sort of subjective, but nonetheless do provide some useful insights. And I think certainly in relation to an internal control perspective, members will be aware that we have had the ongoing involvement each year using what we call the control track software, which is our annual review of our financial internal controls, which has been auspiced by Tony on an annual basis. But you'll be aware that this financial year, through the budget process, there was the budget funds allocated specifically to an internal audit function, and we're being aware of the fact too that we've referenced, I think, in the work plan update table to this meeting, we're in the process of finalising the tender assessment in that space. So we will be awarding a tender shortly for the development of that internal audit work plan, which will very much influence and support our sort of compliance and control space. So I would suspect we'll certainly be seeing tangible improvements in that internal audit control space.
Through the chair, am I able to make another comment there? Is that
Yes, yes, please.
I think it's really important that we have that type of discussion at an audit committee because it gives staff an opportunity to tell us and advise of how we're tracking with our internal controls and also compliance. And when you have these excellence programs and these figures pop up, it also it's good transparency and good governance to have that discussion. So I bring that up deliberately so we can have that discussion and not only raise our own awareness as a committee, but also, I guess, support staff. And if, you know, there is a need to invest in resources around internal controls, then we've had that discussion and we understand why.
Thank you, Karen.
Through the chair, if I could just briefly comment further to that, you'll notice with the very next agenda item, members, relative to the interim audit, the first interim audit undertaken by our new auditors. I don't obviously want to jump the gun on that item, but you'll see from that report very much a positive result from their initial overview audit of our internal controls.
Yep. Thanks, Paul. We will get to that. Now, I see Councillor Little has a tick. Are you wanting to say something alongside his name?
He's already voted.
Peter, so I can just make one closing comment too.
Yep.
As we've referenced in the report and in the attachment 2, which is our own internal analysis. We have referenced in that report that there are some areas, we believe in the report warranting further investigation, which we've highlighted, and we've indicated in the report that they'll be investigated further, and we'll come back with, once we've done that analysis and investigation, we'll come back with a subsequent report to the committee with the findings of those investigations.
Yep. Thanks, Paul. Can I also just say, when I've reread this report again, and being mindful that this is done in, what was it dated? Is it 2019 was when this analysis was done? Is that correct, Paul?
Yes, this relates to obviously data from the 2018-19 financial year. So the sequence of events was this information was populated by staff at the sort of start of this financial year. Really kicked off more towards the end of the conclusion of the financial statements, and that the data was only lodged with PwC, I think about October, early November, by us and most other councils. They obviously then do their extensive analysis, and you'll see from the cover of their report, their results were released in late December 2019.
Okay. The reason why I'm saying that is that I think, while I agree with Karen's comments that having this type of information is great insights into benchmarking and looking at improving your practices, but I think every organisation will now have to be mindful that post-COVID, how will your organisation look? And if we start thinking that the way it looked in 2019 is the way it's going to look in 2021, I think we can be sort of caught up with maybe doing things that really won't impact. I agree, areas such as internal controls, very, very critical, because that's there to manage your risks. But I think in looking at this report, it's really looking at it and saying, well, what is the town of Gawler Council going to look like going forward?
It's almost impossible to ascertain, Peter, isn't it?
No, I agree, Karen, but what I'm saying is I don't want people to pick something up that happened in 2019 and say, oh, that's a good benchmark. Let's head to that when maybe the people that made up that higher benchmark are actually moving away from that because they're saying it's not sustainable post-COVID. So all I'm saying is just be mindful that we did have this report and, you know, here we are now 12 months down the track and everything's changing.
Yeah, accept that.
So are there any other questions, comments on this report? Because we've got 2 recommendations.
I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Karen. Seconded.
Second.
Who was that?
Second, Peter.
Okay, thanks, Peter. All in favour? Yep. Okay. So everyone's got their hand. Thank you. Carried. Okay, 6.4 is the which Paul alluded to, the external audit management letter. So as Paul says, so this is the first time that the auditor Galpins have actually had a chance to come with some fresh set of eyes and have a look at it of the actual control environment, because this is being mindful that this is the interim testing. It's all around the transactions and controls, so they can then make an assessment as to how they would go about conducting their end of year audit. So Paul, over to you, or Tony, whoever wants to talk to this item.
Yeah, I'm happy for Tony to speak to it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Through the chair, yes, this, as everybody would appreciate, Galpins are our new external auditors. And in their first year, and this is the first management letter that we've received from them. Just to put it in context, obviously, different accounting firms have slightly different approaches to the way they conduct their audit. So we really didn't know what to expect in terms of what they would be looking at. And I must confess, I was caught off guard in the way that they approached their audit, because their first visit basically concentrated on internal controls, which is not typical that I've found. But in any case, that was the way that they felt that was the best way to understand our business. So all in all, what they seem to have done mainly was what we normally would do in our own review of internal controls. Now, they tested 100 controls, and they found that 86% of those controls, or 86 out of the 100, as the report says, were the controls were operating effectively, which means that they are working well. There were some weaknesses that they identified, which we also had previously identified. So their rating of 86% mirrors pretty much what we've been scoring ourselves internally for the last 5 to 7 years, thereabouts. So we are still in the process of undertaking our review. We're probably about 95% of the way through, and the scores that we give ourselves are slightly higher than what Galpins have done, but very consistent. So it's good that the external auditors and our own internal testing have similar scores. So I guess that means that what we're doing is comparable, and we're not in any way providing answers to questions which are more favourable than possibly what they ought to be. So all in all, we and the auditors were very happy with the first visit that they undertook. They will be back in September to complete their audit for the financial year. But as their report indicates, in relation to internal controls, they indicate that they will issue an unqualified opinion, which is great from our point of view. Their report was extremely detailed. The report that I think you're looking at, which was the draft, goes into great detail about their methodologies and the types of testing that they did in a whole range of areas. But all in all, we were quite satisfied. I think we've still got a little bit of a way to go to talk to the auditors to completely understand their methodology and also for them to understand our business. But I think the report is a fair report, and I was quite satisfied with the gradings that they provided to us.
Thank you, Tony. So I open it up for questions from the Audit Committee members.
I've got a question, Peter.
Yes, Karen, thank you.
Thank you, Tony, for your summary and the work that has gone into this. I'm looking at page, well, I'm not sure what I'm looking at, page 409 of 451 of the Galpin's assessment, and they've gone into further detail around their assessments of what they've found. And I'm on page 16, I think, Tony. I'm on page 409 of the attachment and page 16 of their report. Their interim. And I'm looking.
That's the one around purchase orders, Karen?
Yeah, well, it keeps coming up, and I remember it coming up previously, and I know that's acknowledged, but just your thoughts on, you've said that the recent implementation of an internal audit and business improvement function should facilitate the introduction of this review process. Unfortunately, compliance has not been tested as limited resources have not allowed this process to occur. This came up quite some time ago through the previous auditors. So just perhaps some comments on, how it won't come up, like how we're going to really deal with this. I know you've put certain things in place.
Through the chair, yes, you are correct. That particular weakness has arisen and certainly has been noted on previous occasions. I guess we've been hamstrung to some degree by the change in staff personnel. But we do have issues in terms of being able to comply with our procedures and policies in this area. And I guess what we're saying is that now that we have provided for 2 additional roles, one which is our business improvement role, and with Tara Shilabia being our new team leader in business improvement and procurement, and also the separated role of the internal audit function, which has been assigned to Nathan Hall to supplement his work on WHS. We believe that with those additional resources, we can now more effectively tackle this weakness and and make sure that we all follow the procedures that have been set out. So I think, as Paul alluded to a short while ago, we are still effectively putting the final touches to those so that we can actually investigate and improve those particular controls. But you are correct, it has come up before, but I'm confident that with those additional resources now, those dedicated resources, that we could expect that we won't see that, hopefully, for a long time into the future.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments on?
Yeah, Peter.
Yep, Peter, thank you.
Yeah, just had a question on the one related to asset management was earlier on. I'm just trying to find the page. Yep, it's page 403 or page 10 of the government's report. Yeah, just understand what's being said there. So we have got plans for transport, stormwater and open place, which have been pretty much completed and will be presented to the IES committee. I got a question is, will that also come to the audit committee? Will there be a report to the audit committee on the outcome of those new asset management plans?
Through the chair, yes, that would be my expectation, that it would filter through the audit committee as well.
Yep. Okay. And could you just explain what's happening with the building one and when that might be completed? I gather there's been some staff absence there or changes. So that's the other one that's outstanding and overdue. What's the process for getting that one completed?
Yes, look, through the chair, there has been a slight slippage in that regard. That's due to the resignation of our team leader, property and procurement, earlier this calendar year. That role was previously team leader, property and procurement. We had identified that we needed to split that role to do both elements appropriate justice. So we now have a dedicated acting team leader in property, and Tara Shillaby now taking carriage of the procurement element. In terms of the timelines, I have spoken to property staff about this in recent weeks, that I am certainly keen to get traction in this space, such that I wanted to be in the position where I thought it was logical and appropriate that we'd be tabling a building asset management plan to the committee in conjunction with the other asset management plans relative to transport, stormwater and open space, so they could all be tabled as a collective at the same time.
Right. Okay. And are the values in the asset management plans, or the valuation of the assets, is that conducted more regularly than the period? I mean, that 2013, these were last adopted. Have the values been altered since then, or are we expecting to see some big change there?
No, through the chair, what we've done in terms of the asset valuations, if that's what you're referring to, Peter,
Yep.
yes, they're reviewed obviously far more regularly than that, and on an annual basis, whether it's a desktop review or and we've endeavoured to, in more recent years, our approach has been to deliberately conduct more regular reviews, so that we're not no longer having the situation where we do a review in a valuation review in 1 year, for example, and then don't do any further revals for 3 years, and then suddenly you've got a huge spike in your valuations, and suddenly a major shift in your depreciation, which needs to be explained and accounted for. So to sort of soften those 3 to 5 year spikes, we endeavour to do a revaluation, either a full reval or desktop reval every financial year, so that those variations, we essentially get rid of those 3 to 5 year spikes that suddenly come as a shock to elected members. It's more to flatten out the curve, so to speak.
Yep. Okay. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Peter. Paul, I had a couple of questions on this report, and the first one was actually what Peter's just alluded to. Can you maybe just follow up with the auditors and let them know when the last formal valuations were done and what they're going to rely on? Because I would hate for them to come back and say your valuations are outdated. I know you've done a desktop, but that's not what they will expect, because that's meant to be done every 5 years as well as a formal valuation. Can you just follow up with them for all your different asset categories? Just let them have a look and see when was the last one that was done, and are they going to accept that? Because if they're not, you've got 8 weeks to try and get some to come and do some revals, because we don't want them to make a comment or reference that these numbers, we can't place reliance on them, and because these are the bigger numbers of council. So can you just follow that one up?
Yes, yes, we can definitely do that, Chair. Just as a subsequent comment too, I know with buildings, for example, where I think Tony will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've got a budget bid or budget funds in the draft budget for next year to do a full reval of our buildings. And when I touch on reference to like a desktop revaluation for transport assets, what we invariably do in that space is we also do get an independent assessment of that desktop revaluation.
Okay.
Just to validate that what we're thinking that desktop movement will be is valid and appropriate. So I just bring that to attention of members as well, that we do in those years when we do a desktop reval, we do have an independent assessment to sort of validate the accuracy of those revals.
Okay, thank you, Paul. That's good. Now, can I just take the committee members, if we go to page 399 of the report and look at that bottom paragraph. Oh, sorry, the second last paragraph, the one after the table. And it's important that, and again, that we understand with the changes in audit firms, yes, Tony was right, they do things differently and they report differently, but I think this is a very important paragraph where they say, we recommend that council priorities the moderate risk findings as failure in compensating controls. And then they go on, where is the other part of it? No, sorry, my apologies. Can we go one page back? So it's actually 398. That part's important after the full, it says the council should also perform its own assessment of priority based not only on audit risk. So these levels that we are seeing of high, moderate, low are audit risk. So it's about them. What's the risk of them getting the true and fair opinion on their financial statements? And the reason why I'm raising this is I think it's important that we take our risk management system, and we've got Nathan there who's the expert in that, and take these findings and give it the council risk rating. And the one I'll give you the example to is the one that they've raised just as moderate around conflicts of interest not being declared. Now that could actually be a very high risk from a reputation point of view to council. I mean, that's page 405. You know, we're talking contracts there of 216, 153,000. Now, if there was any issues in relation to those contracts, that there are conflicts, well, I can tell you the last thing we want is ICAC around finding out that these things have happened. So my point is that I think this report, while it's come out from an audit, I think we've got it now reflected from a business operations point of view and risk rate them from the council's risk matrix. And I think Nathan can do you that exercise because that's what his expertise is about in consultation with Paul and Tony and the other players in the finance field. I also had one other of the findings. Where was it? I think it had to do with the payroll. It happened to do with the payroll, you know, where they said there was people had access to the payroll or the payroll files. Oh, yeah, sorry. So if you go to page 412, So that's the processing and uploading the payroll EFT files. Again, their finding was that they're saying currently there are 3 different officers with access to the folders where the EFT file is stored. Now, what I find interesting is that the management comment says, yes, we know, because they're all 3 people that work in HR and they should have access to it. So what I'm trying to raise here, Paul, is that when you have your exit interview with Galpins, to me, if they pick something up that actually shouldn't be hitting a report, I mean, they're saying, we've got 3 people that have got access to these files, and, council coming to, yes, we know, because they're all in HR, they shouldn't even be raising that as an issue. And can I also, again, and I think I've said this on numerous occasions, when we get, whether it's external or in future internal audit reports, I know that some of the management responses have got who's responsible for fixing it.
Oh,
and
yeah.
remember, we've said we'd also like to know a due date, so that
Yes.
when we as an audit
Yeah.
committee are tracking it, we can
Yes.
say, okay, something's going to be done by December. When it comes to December, we know it's either been cleared or it's been, pushed forward due to whatever reason. So can we just have that included on there? Okay, any other comments or questions you'd like to raise in relation to this report, committee members?
Peter,
Yes,
I could
Peter.
just suggest that maybe when we get these reports, I know some other councils deal with it this way, but that would be useful to have those highlighted, weaknesses, particularly the moderate ones, or moderate or higher, actually reported within the body of the report, rather than just going to the attachments.
Yep.
So that we can then deal with those queries and the council's response, and things like the due date, when they're going to be fixed up, and all that sort of who's responsible. That could be incorporated into that report, basically within the main part of the item, as opposed to an attachment.
All right. Yep.
That'd be,
So,
yeah.
So the covering page of each item. Yep. Are you happy with that?
Yes, we can facilitate that. Yes.
Yep. Okay.
Excellent. Good. Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Okay, so then we've got a 2-part recommendation again, that we receive the report with management's responses and the actions. Thanks, Karen. Seconded. Is anyone going to second this report?
Yeah. Do you want me to press the button?
Well, okay. Yeah. Well, now I'm finally seeing something's come through. Thank you, Peter. And I know there's a few hands coming up now. It's the first time. I've never seen it before. So thank you. Okay. All in favour? Okay. Thank you, Carrie. Okay. 8-5 or 6-5, should I say?
I'm happy to move that way, Peter.
Our audit committee self-assessment. Thank you, Karen.
I'm happy to second.
Thanks, Peter. And again, Paul, I know while the results have come out quite well, I think if there are any areas for improvement or any comments that have come through from the committee members, make sure that that's incorporated into our work plan, which is obviously the next item for discussion. So does anyone want to have any comments on this before we take it to a vote? We've had a mover and a seconder. Councillor Little, I see your hands up. No?
Yep. I just seconded that. That's all. I got beaten to the punch.
Okay, thank you. So if there's no further comment, then Moved and seconded. All in favour? Okay. Carried. Thank you. Okay, 6.6 is the Audit Committee work plan. Paul, do you want to take us through this? I know it's just a
Yes.
status of where we are.
Yep. Thank you through the chair. Yes, this is obviously just a progress report for you in terms of actions to date against the work plan adopted by the committee. The only real comment I want to make, Chair and members, was relative to policy reviews, and which is on page 450 or 451. We did have about 2 months ago the intent of reviewing these policies and tabling them to you tonight. Primarily my interest was certainly in relation to the service level policies, but more broadly, really all the ones listed there. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 situation and crisis has had to dramatically change, tweak the finance teams and myself's priorities, as would have been evident from the reports, including the one prior to this meeting that have been tabled. So as we've noted in the comments, I'm now planning to hopefully be in a position to then table these policies for your consideration of review at the next audit meeting in July. But just stress again that the intent was to present them to you tonight. But yes, the COVID crisis has intervened. But outside of those policies reviews, I believe we're very much on track towards completion of the work plan, but happy to answer any questions members may have.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions or comments?
Peter?
Yes, Peter.
How often do we review these policies? What's the timeline? Is it every 2 years or what?
Through the chair, look, Peter, that is very much influenced by the nature of the policy. Some of them, for example, like our strategic rating policy, is reviewed on an annual basis, whereas other policies of not such significance can be reviewed once during the life of the council. But generally, on average, most policies are reviewed generally every 2 years.
Right.
On average.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'm of the view that often these things come up all too often and there's not much change, generally speaking. And if some of them are, not that important, or, I mean, you can always bring a change in policy to the committee when there's something significant happening out of sequence, basically. But otherwise, I would be arguing for seeing them less often than more often, if you know what I mean.
Yep, I agree.
Yep.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Paul, in relation to the our self-assessment survey, I note that it's still got it in there as in progress. I would have thought that would have been completed now that we've already, we've had it done and we've looked at it at this. It says refer to agenda item 6.5, so I would have thought that that should be now in a green box, the self-assessment.
Yeah, through the chair, yes, I recognise it's essentially complete. My sort of approach has been to only reference it as completed once the committee's actually considered it.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Okay, that's good to know. And will the 2021 plan be coming at the next meeting as well?
Yes, the intent would be that would be scheduling a meeting as normal in sort of early July.
Yep.
And what would be tabling to that, Chair, would be obviously a update report of this work plan, but also tabling for consideration and endorsement by the committee a draft work plan for 2021.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And can I just maybe say flag when you're putting this paper together to maybe even talk to Galpins again and let them know the proposed date of that meeting in the future for them to come and do the in-camera discussion? That'd be much appreciated.
Yes. Yeah,
Right.
I'm not through the chair. I'm not sure, Tony. Have we sort of confirmed an indicative date yet with them for the audit or not?
The second half of September, Paul. We don't have firm dates yet, but we have asked that they attend in the last 2 weeks of September.
Okay. Thank you, Tony. And Paul, can we also, just to flag it in advance for the 2021 work plan, in the same vein that you've got for external audit, the in-camera review with the auditors, can you put that same one down for the internal auditors? So the internal audit business analyst resource, that they are also required to come and have that in-camera discussion with the audit committee.
Yeah, I can schedule that in.
Okay, and I also note that Nathan will have the audit plan ready, or reading in here that should be ready for us to review. So the internal audit.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Any further questions from the committee members? I can't see any questions there. So can I have someone to move this report, please? Be received, noted. Can't see any hands coming up. All right, Councillor Koch, thank you. Seconded, Councillor Little, thank you. All in favour? Okay, all carried. Thank you very much. Okay, items listed for discussion. We've got nil. Items listed for discussion at future meetings. I think our management would have enough to bring to future meetings for us around COVID. And questions without notice is nil. Motions without notice nil. And I thank you all for your time tonight and your contributions, both committee members, management and staff.
Peter, sorry, Peter, just before we go, I just wanted to ask, just reflecting on the prior the council meeting, which I know is all done and dusted, but I did wonder about, we're providing 250, or proposing to provide $250,000 for providing relief to ratepayers, and I noticed the business lobby were looking for a lot more than the 250,000. They didn't think that would be enough. In fact, they suggested double that might be necessary. But I also wondered what's going to happen. That's just talking about businesses, but it's not just businesses that are having financial trouble. People who are losing their jobs have also got financial difficulties. And how is the council going to separate giving rebates or to a business and not applying it to other ratepayers? So I just wanted to raise that. I don't know if anybody's got a comment on the strategy there.
I might comment. Have a comment.
Thanks, Karen.
Yeah, look, I think that there's, and you I'm sure you know this, but rate relief is only one aspect of stimulating an economy, and a lot of the experts are saying that giving rate relief doesn't necessarily trigger economic recovery. It's relief for people, but part of economic recovery is in fact stimulus packages from above, federal state, and they're going to be critical in providing jobs for people that aren't getting jobs through civil construction, through building projects, etc. So they're actually more important than rate growth, because if our building workers and our electricians and our plumbers, etc., don't get the work, and we know that Gawler has a greater complement of blue collar workers than other areas. We know that through ABS data.
Yep.
So, my view and view from federal government, the Premier, they're all saying the same thing. And the LGA had a piece of work commissioned through University of Adelaide, economic studies, and they confirm that economic stimulus is through these major building packages. So how we contribute to that is going to be critical. So from my point of view, yes, we've got that package of 250, but it's in fact the capital projects. We've now given ourselves an opportunity to review and look at our capital projects, what they might look like. It might be sport and rec, it might be something else, it might be a combination of both. If we can partner with federal and state government, if we can get some of that money, we can provide our own stimulus, and that will kickstart our economy, and it'll have a more lasting effect. Well, that's the information that I'm being told. So I'm just sharing that now.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's quite right. I'm just conscious of the fact that some people who don't have a lobby group necessarily will be finding it tough. And I know you've got the stimulus schemes to perhaps help with that, but that will also help business as well. You know, how you differentiate business from other ratepayers who are actually effectively paying for that support for business. So, just another perspective, I guess.
I think getting the word out is really important. Well, and targeting people that are in hardship, and Paul Horwood, you're well aware of this, that it's not just about business, it is about hardship. You know, and there might be two people who have a mortgage that both lost their jobs, you know.
Yeah.
We know that. Nathan Shanks mentioned tonight 250 workers have lost their jobs.
Yeah.
You know, so they're some of them might be ratepayers.
Yeah.
Our hardship policy is for everybody, not just for the businesses.
That's right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
But I think getting the word out is going to be important, and I guess we'll endeavour to do so. And, yeah, I'm well aware it's not just about business, absolutely. And hotels have been hit exceptionally hard, we know that. But there is a hidden factor, and Di's right, the hardship policy, but getting that word out is going to be important, and I guess we're keen to hear people's ideas. And Paul Horde, I'm sure you've got some good ideas of how we get that word out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have access.
Excellent.
All right. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter, for stimulating that discussion. Thank you. So again, I thank you all for your time and contribution tonight to the meeting, and have a good night. Officially close the meeting at 8:37.
Thank you. Bye.
See you later.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Peter.
Cheers.
Bye.